Everybody, this is Matt Martin, the Grass Factor, and I'm going to attempt to do a live video here where we kind of go through. So one of the things I've been working on in the background, and this is totally, I'm going to preface this by saying this is not complete in any way. I still have a lot of work left to go on this, but it is the SUBVERT application planner. And I have been working on this because so many people ask me, how do I use the SUBVERT products in a program type of setting? And so I put together this program planner as kind of a guideline for you to be able to understand and build out applications based on the product offerings, right? So as a little bit of a general rule of thumb, the way the products are broken down into is that there are just individual inputs. If you're targeting specific NPK values in a liquid form, there's going to be specialty chemistries used for individual types of scenarios, like silica, for instance, if you are attempting to harden off a plant, or for golf greens, or to help turf stand up a little better. There's going to be specialty chemistries like phosphites if you're using those as part of a pythium defense or a SAR lister of some sort. And we have some specialty micronutrient blends that are going to contain micronutrients combined with like salicylic acid, for instance, salicylic acid also being another SAR lister. And all of those would kind of fit more into the biostimulant category. And so you have the NPK piece of things where you can target individual nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium goals, as well as the specialty chemistry and biostimulant piece. COVID. So I'm throwing the link up in the chat right now that you can take a look at. It's also linked in the video description down below. So I thought we would go ahead and jump through this. So once you download the application planner here, I attempted to try and structure this in such a way that you can walk by or walk through it individually and understand a little bit of what's going on. So step number one is you're going to select your turf type, right? So do you have cool season or warm season grass? And everything will pre-populate for you depending on which one you choose. Now, step number two seems to have confused a couple of people that I've talked to, so I thought I would go ahead and give a little bit of an explanation right here on the front end. And what specifically step two is would be in the instance of having 100% growth probability. And by growth probability, I mean optimum conditions for the entirety of a month, how much nitrogen you would want to burn through. As a general rule of thumb, kind of the adage is 1 pound of N. You're seeing more and more people shrink that to about 3/4 of a pound of N. And so if you have a home lawn scenario that is not real low heights, right? So if you are real cutting your lawn, then obviously you want to dial that back, because as you increase growth rate, you're also increasing mowing frequency, which can cause problems in and of itself. You're also altering kind of the texture of the turf. I'll leave it kind of like that. You cause some texture manipulation to take place there as well. So as a general rule of thumb, if you have a home lawn that's maintained with a rotary mower at heights, I would say above 1 inch, then I would leave this set at about 0.75 or 1 pound. If you are at low cut turf, then I would go ahead and shrink this down to 0.5 or even lower, depending on what experience has taught you where you should be. I know some people, like for instance, Green Doc, who I have on for Pick the Doc spraying, he may even run a little bit lower, but I think he actually sits somewhere around 0.5 for low cut turf, depending on the seasonality. So since we're going to be working with cool season turf and a home lawn setting, we'll say it's tall fescue at 3 inches or however high you maintain it. Then the next thing you're going to do is insert your average temperatures. Now, I give you a little bit of a clue here on how to find your average temperatures, and I provided a link to weatherbase.com, and so that's where we are going to go. Question here is residential turf transition zone. What would N per month goal be based on climate appraisal? 1 pound Bermuda, 0.75 pound fescue. So yes, I like that, Patrick. 1 pound for Bermuda, 0.75 pounds of fescue, I think is right on the money Generally, could you get away with 0.75 with Bermuda? You could. I will say this, that if you are a lawn care applicator, a professional lawn care applicator who is purely dependent on the aesthetic of your turf being success or failure, I would err on the side of high. Right. And that's going to sound a little crazy, but especially with something like Bermuda grass that can be a little bit more difficult to keep green and thick and dense at lower inputs if you do not have the flexibility to real mow or utilize a growth regulator of sorts, then I would err on the side of caution at 1 pound for Bermuda, but generally 0.75 pounds, 3/4 of a pound for fescue would be ideal. So what we're going to do is now input our average temperatures. And I have just pulled up Knoxville, Tennessee right here because that's where I am. And so I'm going to input these temperatures into the spreadsheet, right? So I averaged 39 degrees in January, 42 in February, basically 50 in March, 60 in April, 67 in May, 75 in June, 78 in July, 77 in August, 72 in September, 60 in October, 49 in November, and 41 in December. So as you can see, it'll start to spit out information to you right here where it's making a generalized recommendation that I need to apply roughly 4 4/10 of a pound of N. I'm going to need 0.54 pounds of actual phosphorus. That's not P2O5. Remember, P2O5 is what we see on fertilizer bags, and P2O5 is not the same thing as actual phosphorus. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and I'll show you where on this sheet it actually takes that into account for you. So if you look on your P per pounds per 1,000 square feet, the recommendation is 0.54. But when you convert that to P2O5, that's actually 1.25 pounds of P2O5. And the same thing with pounds of K and K2O. They are not the same thing. You have to convert them. And here you'll see 2.2 pounds of K is 2.6 pounds of K2O. When you look at a fertilizer label and it tells you pounds of P or pounds of K, if it's a 1648, that 4 is going to be from P2O5, that 8 is going to be from K2O. As just some inside, information there that everybody needs to take into consideration. Now, step number 4 here, you will input your soil test values. Now, the recommendation here is to use Mehlich 3 soil test values. If you are not using Mehlich 3, you need to convert your soil test values into Mehlich 3. Now, this is mathematical and not entirely accurate. So your mileage may vary if you are converting from one soil test form to another if you did not perform a Mehlich 3 soil test. So what I am talking about specifically here is if you performed a Mehlich 3 soil test, how you would integrate that into the sheet. So say you use like this soil test here that I'm going to be looking at is from Spectrum Analytics. I pulled out the user's information who sent it to me. Thanks. It was somebody in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not going to say who it was, but anyway, this was their soil test. And so we are going to transfer this information into the soil test values we have on the spreadsheet. So for instance, with phosphorus here, we see we had 126 parts per million Mehlich 3 phosphorus. We had 117 parts per million Mehlich 3 potassium. We had 1,025 parts per million of calcium and 129 parts per million of magnesium, 9 parts per million of sulfur, 165 parts per million of iron, and 25 parts per million of manganese. Now, as you enter that in here, you will see it will make adjustments. Now, all of a sudden, our total season demand, if you look, our phosphorus has shot to 0. And this has shot to 0 because our phosphorus levels in our soil test are high enough to support not necessarily applying any phosphorus for this season. Could we still apply phosphorus in this season? Yes, we could if we're going to be seeding or something like that, and you want to provide a little bit of an insurance policy to your seed, because remember, seedlings in soluble phosphorus equate success, long-term success. So if you wanted to do that in that scenario and apply a 1/4 pound of phosphorus or something like that with your seed, by all means, you certainly can. Is it required? Do you have to apply phosphorus? No, you do not, because your soil has enough in it. Now, not all of this is going to be soluble phosphorus. What you see here at 126 parts per million, that is not all soluble phosphorus. That is an acid digested soil, and the total contents via acid digestion of how much phosphorus you have in your soil. Again, not always the same as far as what's plant available and what's here. So when you're talking about new seedlings, that's not always all available. Therefore, it may be imperative to apply something along the lines of a soluble phosphorus source like MAP or DAP, or that's the whole reason we have starter fertilizers. You'll notice in our product line, we have a product called Peak, which is a dipotassium phosphate and peptide material that functions as a starter of sorts. And then we also have just straight DKP 02431. Again, high phosphorus, high potassium to function as a tank mix companion in a starter fertilizer scenario. So you can see here, these are what the general recommendations are now. Now we know that the total for the year is going to be 4.4 pounds of N and 2.2 pounds of K2O. Real simple, based off what our soil test values are. Now, some may say, oh, if you have 117 parts per million of potassium, you really don't need to apply any potassium. And that's technically, yes, that's true, but I would like to maintain that 117 parts per million of potassium, and therefore that's why the output here is making the recommendation of going ahead and still applying 2.2 pounds of K2O to maintain that 117 parts per million of potassium. If you fail to apply 2.2 pounds of K2O, then what will end up happening is that you will drop your soil test potassium levels in that scenario. Okay, so now we are going to go on to the next page here, and this is just going to basically break it out by month, make it a little bit easier to read, and also give you a visualization of what your growth probability is over your months. So you can see here, your growth probability is going to be relatively slow January, February, and March. So the premise there is that if you are going out and treating lawns and you are making an application in, say, February, and you are applying 0.75 pounds of N in February, that will give you an idea of when you need to make your next application, right? So if you apply 0.75 pounds of N in February, then you can already account for what was being used in January, 0.02 pounds in February, 0.15 pounds in March, and it's going to last you basically through somewhere close to the end of April when you need to be making that next application. Again, in that same time period, you can look up at how much potassium you will be using too. You'll be using roughly somewhere around 0.4 of a pound of potassium. So as a general rule of thumb, you should be applying somewhere around 3/4 of a pound of actual nitrogen, and you should be applying somewhere around 1/3 to 4/10 of a pound of K2O in that situation too. Now, I've included this little application planner here, and it's not 100% perfect. It's close, but it's, again, not 100% perfect. So what we'll do is we will set up our monthly application here, and we'll say we are making an application in February. Now, due to my technological limits as far as the skill set that I have in Excel, I don't know how to make it do everything I need it to do functionality-wise as far as saying, okay, well, then I'm taking into account everything I didn't apply in January and February and adding those together. But if you put it into a standpoint that if you were making an application per month, or you can mentally remember to go back and say, oh, okay, I didn't apply anything in that previous month, so I'm going to add it to this next previous month. Like, for instance, here in February, I can take my values in January, which is 0.01, right? Next to nothing, and add it to my March values. And so, oh, okay, I'm at 0.04. Technically, if I am spoon feeding, the only thing I need to apply for this month is based on what it is actually telling me right here, which is, 1/100th of a pound of potassium and 3/100ths of a pound of nitrogen. So what we will do is go over here and pick a product. Well, I need a product that contains nitrogen and potassium, right? Well, real easy. I know Depth Kick is going to be a nitrogen product. And I know K-Max is going to be a potassium product. So real easy, we'll say I just throw in, we'll say 3 ounces of nitrogen here and 3 ounces of K-Max here per 1,000 square feet. And if we look here, the total we applied and we see the nutrients we have remaining, we are in the surplus, meaning we met the minimum that we need to apply for that month. Now, let's take things in, and also I've got a little biostimulant kind of warning here that says no biostimulants are recommended in this application based off your growth probability that we looked at earlier in the charts with the bar graphs and stuff. You can see you don't really need a biostimulant in this scenario. Now, there's some things you may want to do because you're applying something like, I don't know, a pre-emergent, for example. If you apply a pre-emergent, root pruning is one of those necessary evils of pre-emergence. We're going to have a product coming out specifically to deal with that issue without harming the effects of pre-emergent. So that can be a little bit different, but at least as far as what we have on the product line right now, there's no recommendation for a biostimulant in this scenario. So let's say we go ahead and make this change over to a difficult month like May. And based on the numbers in my growth probability and what my weather history looks like, you'll see now biostimulants are beginning to be recommended in this application. Now, you can choose from a multiple ones here. I can't make that determination for you because that's going to be based off more on your weather. So that's where you're going to have to put a little bit of effort into studying the availability of the different products that we have. So for instance, we'll say I choose SLAM, for example, and SLAM is going to be a combination of root-promoting peptides and also fulvic acid, and we include that fulvic acid there to help isolate those peptides to move them into the plant a little bit more efficiently, greater for the foliar absorption that's going to occur. You're going to see a little bit more of it. And you will see here what this would actually be promoting for you is going to be a little bit of root development, probably some tolerance to heat and drought stress, and also manipulate some of the hormones that exist in the plant as well because of, again, that fulvic fraction of it. Now, you can see up here in terms of NP and K requirements, we need roughly 3/4 of a pound of N, and we need 0.37 pounds of K. We don't have to apply this all in a single application. If you were to go out and apply this all in a single application, that can be a little bit risky with a liquid fertilizer because you're having to contend with salt indexes and also the volume of carrier at which you're applying. Of course, my camera dips out right then. Let me bring it back up. So typically, this is where spoon feeding in particular really shines, right? So, for instance, let's say we're going to split this into 2 applications, right? So we know for the entirety of the month of May, we need 0.75 pounds of N. So if we're going to achieve that through applying Depth Kick, right, then we can say, okay, we're going to move it up to 15 ounces per 1,000 square feet. Now, we know half of this is going to be, 0.365, something like that, right? And if we apply 15 ounces, that gives us 0.35. So that's pretty close to half, right? And if we are with K-Max, say we're going to bump this up to 9, right? That puts us at 0.2, which is slightly more than half. So if we made this application here of Depth Kick and K-Max combined together at 15 ounces and 9 ounces per 1,000 square feet, and we did that application 2 times over the month of May, we would hit our target NPK values for an agronomically sound program based off our historical weather data and utilizing the backbone of the climate appraisal form that you've been hearing me talking about, and also following some relatively loose but still adherence to some of the principles in turf that are most dominant right now, for instance, like the MLSN. So you're only applying really what your turf needs without any additional waste. Now, you can see here, biostimulants are recommended. Again, I know I kind of covered this earlier, and you are going to have to pick the biostimulants that work best for you. I can tell you in this type of scenario, for me personally, I know I don't need a lot of micronutrients. I might be running something like MFT in this type of scenario here because I do have just enough foliar available micronutrients to elicit some color responses with it. Plus, I get to capitalize on the benefits of the peptides as well. So this would be my bi-weekly application that I would be making were it my property I were maintaining. Now, of course, you can take this all the way through to however you have to take it through. So we'll say for the month of September. You know, same thing here. We need 0.35 pounds N and 0.2 pounds of K. And we can do this with something like Depth Kick and K Max. But I'll tell you that if you want something that's already kind of pre-formulated, you could use something like SYFE2, right? And just target your rate based on what your requirement is for that month. So I hope this makes sense in being able to strategize which products you're going out with. And also what you can use this tool for is not just SUBVERT products. You can also use this for any other type of product you're using. And the type of program this spreadsheet is actually building for you is based again off the climate appraisal form developed by Pace Turf. So it's not some wishy-washy, maybe this is hardcore, basic, agronomically sound, a scientific approach to agronomy and turf grass management. No fluff, no outside influence, just a pure NPK standpoint of establishing a program. Then you can get creative with the additional things you do on top of this to try and help manipulate your turf in whichever direction you're taking it to. Like, for instance, using something like a biostimulant to overcome abiotic stress, or using something like calcium nitrate in drying out the turf in an effort to harden it off before you move into a more stressful period of time. So I hope that all makes sense. If there's anything in this that you feel like I haven't covered, feel free to go ahead and throw that into the chat, and I would love to go ahead and answer any questions that you have about this. I haven't seen any come in so far, so hopefully we've been able to unpack enough of this that nobody is confused. If you are looking for access to this spreadsheet, again, it is going to be in the link below the video. Also, if you are following along in the live right now, I have posted a link to it in the chat as well. Even if you're watching this after the fact, you can still go into the chat and you will likely see where I have shared this program planner as well. If you have further questions about this, of course, you know, I host the live show on Sunday where we can go into more details about this. And also, I can do a segment on Pick the Doc's Brain as well, where we talk about strategizing using various inputs to achieve whatever NPK targets we're trying to achieve in the plant. Remember, my whole goal in this whole thing is to bring the science back to lawn care and eliminate a lot of the noise that we end up hearing about things that are going to, things that overpromise yet under-deliver type of scenarios, or from the standpoint that if I do this, I can get away without focusing on the simple agronomy that is the most basic for establishing healthy lawns. Now, remember, all the SUBVERT products are currently added. So yeah, yes, all the SUBVERT products are currently added. D10 can be used interchangeably with D10 Plus Lushy, because again, that product is designed more as a biostimulant, D10 and D10 Plus. D10 Plus having a little bit additional potassium in it in case you are trying to hit some sort of specific number out of it. You can include that in your equation. But for the most part, most people are just going to be able to use that interchangeably as they see fit, and especially in a home lawn situation, and not have too much of a big difference in what you're going to get in and out of that type of product. So I have not seen any questions come in. So I just wanted to say thank you all for watching. Again, you can contact me at thegrassfactor.net if you would like. You can also, oops, I need to delete one of those. I don't know if it's the right one or not. You can contact me at thegrassfactor.net. I'm doing a little screen editing at the same time. Yeah, the grass.net, and then I do this. And of course, you can follow along on Facebook at facebook.com/grassfactor. I also stream these to Twitch and Facebook as well. To Jonathan Brothers, yes, as far as everything that I know right now, that is for sure a yes. So thank you for tuning